Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast, The Pulse of High Performance. I'm your host, Seth Davies. We are sponsored by Vision One Software, and I am excited to welcome an old friend, Darren Alfano. He's head of people in organization at NovoNessus, a life science company. Darren and I have been friends and colleagues for over the last 15 years. We worked on a project together when Darren was at Revlon. Darren has got great experience in the people and talent space, and I'm excited to have him join us today to talk about his time in that role and what he's learned, and kind of share some insight in his experience with our audience. So Darren, welcome to our podcast. Why don't you just give the audience a little bit of background and information about your career, and then we'll jump into some questions that I've got for us.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Seth, and thanks for the opportunity to participate in this. I guess it really is 15 plus years now, right?
Yeah.
That's hard to believe. But yeah, so Seth, right now my current role is as head of P&O, standing for People in Organization, known as HR in most other areas around the world, for North America for NovoNessus. So I've been with NovoNessus, formerly NovoZymes, for almost 7 years now. Started in a role in which I was managing both the North and Latin America regions. So I had teams on both sides and was sitting with both regional leadership teams. And this year, it was really in 24 that we merged NovoNessus with Christian Hansen. I now run a much larger North America region, and basically all aspects of the HR function for North America. And just to give you an idea of our size, within our region, we're about 2,200 employees across the U.S. and Canada, and we've got 24, it is, I believe, total HR team members supporting the efforts here.
Hey, that's great, Darren. You've certainly a great leader in the past, and I know you're doing a great job leading the team there. Talk about NovoNessus. So it was NovoZymes and Christian Hansen. You came together. I know you're in the life science space, but just give our audience a couple examples of the product that is produced by your colleagues there.
Yeah, sure. And as we say, we are bettering the world with biology, right? So we use enzymes, microbes, functional proteins for things such as making healthier soils, for higher crop yields, better animal welfare. Great tasting food that stays fresher longer can be achieved through our enzymes as well. Cleaner, softer laundry can be achieved through using our products. Lower emissions, less pollution, better mental and physical health in our probiotic space. That's just a kind of scratching the surface of the. We have many different areas, but it really all centers around that the probiotic and the enzyme and the microbe delivery into the products that we supply to the world.
And when you go to a store, you go to a retail place and buy something, you never think about, right, what goes behind it, what's behind the science of what you're talking about. And who would have thought that enzymes are actually in laundry detergent, right, and products such as that. But to hear you talk about it, sounds like your product and what NovoNessus creates and builds is in a lot of what we use today.
It is, it's like we say, there's a bio-solution for just about everything. I remember, and it's one of the things about working with NovoNessus that, especially when you come in new, it takes you a while to really get a sense of everything that our company does. But even, these enzymes that we use that will take stains out of clothes, an enzyme that's basically a plant extract, that's available to replace chemicals that have the same purpose. It's really amazing, something that's really proud to be a part of.
You and I stay in touch, and we talk pretty frequently. And when you told me that NovoZymes and Christian Hansen were coming together as as a merger and acquisition, right? For anybody that's been through a merger and acquisition, right? There's always anxiety. There's the uncertainty of what does this look like. How did you and your team help manage that with your colleagues in the workplace?
Yeah, this merger was a massive undertaking, and I think I've led a number of acquisitions over my career, which were kind of more the approach of, okay, we're bringing this organization in, we'll show them how we do things, and then we'll get acclimated and move forward. This is a true combination of two organizations where we set a new path forward together, which was something new for me and, really something new for most people within our organization. Going from 6,000 employees to over 10,000 employees globally, much expanded product line. And, I would say that just a couple of my reflections over the past year, I would say that I have typically, and I really realized it last year, I'm okay operating in a gray zone per se, where issue comes up, there's not a policy, there's not a practice, there's differing policies, there's differing approaches. We get together, figure out the best way, and we move forward. But my watch out there, and one of the things I learned last year was that you really have to understand that not everybody operates in that same way, and that, working in a gray area like that can really cause a lot of anxiety for people in the organization. The uncertainty is very hard for people to deal with often. So, you have to work with people like that situationally, and just understanding that it's not as easy just saying, all right, let's make a call and move forward. There can be some extra attention needed depending on what people's comfort level is with the gray zones, the uncertainty, the volatility in making such substantial changes like this.
One of the things is there's so much talk right now about mental health in our employees and our colleagues. And one of the things that I read recently in an article was that 90% of what we think about never really comes to reality, right?
Yep.
And it's kind of what you're talking about, right? We're in this gray zone, and it's easy for our minds to take us to different places. And everything I've read, and I'm sure you would feel the same way, is it's about communication, right? It's about communicate. Here's what we know, right? And to kind of take away some of those fears and those anxieties that employees have in that space.
That is absolutely the way to go about it. Clear, frequent, consistent communication. And I really commend our global team for taking the lead on that. I mean, it was really every week that we were seeing new information. Here's what's going on. We did a lot of surveys. There were a lot of open opportunities for people to give feedback along the way. And, I think having that regular and consistent communication really helped tremendously in helping people's comfort level with what was happening. Because, again, of course, change is one thing. This level of change was on another level of what most people were used to throughout our organization.
This is a question I like to ask on every podcast and with every guest that we have. I want you to go back in time, and when you were in college or shortly thereafter, and you got your first opportunity in human resources. Was that something you were seeking, or was that something that was just dumb luck? It was somebody, you applied for a job in human resources and you fell into it.
I really had no plan coming out of college. And I've told my kids they better have a plan, unlike their dad did, right? So I really didn't have a plan. I actually, when I graduated college, I moved to Mexico for a couple of years and was taking some classes down there and learning the language and teaching. And when I came back, I landed with a staffing company that hired me only because I was bilingual. I had no experience in staffing, but they said, okay, if the guy's bilingual, we need that. We'll hire you and we'll teach you everything else. And then I moved from there into a manufacturing role with an organization that we were staffing for, which was Revlon.
Okay.
So I moved into a manufacturing role. I was actually working second shift, running lipstick and makeup operations. And one day, I was only about 6 months into the role, and the VP of HR at Revlon at the time tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I know you don't have so much of the background for it, but you're, again, going back to being bilingual. It's helped quite a bit. he said, I need somebody on my team that's bilingual. You seem to have a pretty good approach to, employee relations. Do you want to give it a shot? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? Because interestingly enough, I wasn't really excited about the manufacturing role that I was in at the time. So it seemed like a good opportunity to try something else. So I decided to give it a shot, and I worked for a couple of years in the trenches, as I say. I was working second and third shift, and just churning employee relations issues one after another. I mean, Revlon in Oxford is a massive facility where employee relations issues were a daily thing, a multiple per day thing. And that's really how I got my start in it. So I had no intention of landing in HR, but that's where I landed and ultimately where I stayed for, almost over 20 years now.
You and I had the same conversation with our kids, because when I was in college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it was just kind of blind luck that I ended up in this space. But when my kids went to college, all three of them have had in their mind, here's what I want to study, here's what I want to do, here's my end goal with that. And I think that's kind of been a shift that I've seen from when you and I were growing up to now, is that kids are very intentional in what they want to study, right? And they go there knowing, hey, I want to be an accountant, I want to go to law school, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a school teacher. So much different than when you and I were doing that.
Yeah, that's great. I applaud them for not being as confused as I was back
hey,
then.
So you've had a great career in human resources and people and organization. Was there a reflection point or inflection point where you said, this is what I want to do. I am on the right path and I want to continue on this path. Was there a conversation or a milestone there for you, Darren?
Yeah, for me, it was when I had the opportunity to move into the HR role with Revlon, and I had done a few different things. I actually, much earlier in my career, thought that manufacturing management was going to be the path for me. And eventually getting into like a plant manager type role was what I was looking for. And, held a few different roles in that realm, actually relocated to Arkansas to take an assistant plant manager role, and then ended up coming back to North Carolina. So I thought that's what I wanted to do. Again, when I got that tap on the shoulder to move into HR, after I was in it for, several months up to a year, I started realizing the impact that HR has on the organization, the impact, the influence, and the fact that, really when you have great HR programs and great HR strategy in place at the organization, it makes a substantial business impact. And I had a great opportunity to work with a lot of great leaders in the realm of HR that were pushing those changes that I could learn from. So, again, for me, it was that impact factor where I always thought of HR as like the classic personnel term. You'd go down there to do attendance write-ups and stuff like that, and then that was about the end of what they did, outside of providing benefit administration and the other areas of HR. But what I got hooked on was just that impact of those great programs and the strategy, and that's why I said, yeah, I want to be a part of that, and never look back.
Yeah, I've seen over, the evolution of HR, right? Because for a lot of organizations, and look, people are the most important asset for an organization, right? So it's important to have the right people in the HR department. But, HR used to, at least my view, used to be viewed much more as transactional, right? That's where I went for benefits. That's where I went for payroll. That's where I went for issues. But now they've become much more strategic. And, you've got multi-generations in the workforce, right? So how do you manage that? What's the training we need to provide? How do we make sure we have the right people in the right job? So HR has become very important in organizations. Hey, you said something I want to talk more about. You talked about, you said I had great leaders. What were some of those characteristics of those great leaders that you lean into now as you're a leader for 2,200 people?
Yeah, I would say the great leaders I've had, and I'll preface by saying you learn a lot from the great ones, and you learn from the bad ones too, right? Where you can say, okay, that clearly doesn't work, as far as motivating people. But I've been fortunate enough to have some really great leaders across my career, and they saw some early potential in me that needed to be developed. So that was always one of the big factors for me, is that these great leaders, it's like they were always looking out for my development. And as they were working on different things, they're putting strategies together, they're dealing with issues, they would say to themselves, you know what, this is probably a good learning opportunity for Darren. I'll pull him into this and get him some expertise. Along with that, I think the great leaders I've had have been very good situationally. They've always known when to give me space, that I know what I'm doing. I don't need support in that area, versus, what areas does he need more support and coaching with, so that, they would not micromanage, but at the same time, when it was needed, they would roll their sleeves up and get involved and support me in handling challenges or thinking about my own career development paths. And I would say just that situational component of the way that they led was what made them so effective. They never tried to lead everybody in the same way. They would look at the individual, understand what the needs were, and then craft their leadership approach based on that. And that's what I think was the most impactful.
Yeah, I love that you say you learn from the great ones, but you also learn, from the not so great ones of what not to do, right? And I had someone on the podcast say, you need to learn when do I lead and when do I manage, right? When do I lead the people, but then when do I manage them to help accomplish the task? And I think that's important as well on that. And one of the things you see in the in the news and you read online all the time are challenges with talent and staffing and the Great Resignation. I think we're behind the Great Resignation now, but how do you and your colleagues, what are you doing right now from a talent and staffing development to make sure you've got the right people in the right place at NovoNessus?
Seth, my biggest concern right now around the talent landscape and finding any type of talent in any function is not easy, right? But we have a lot of very specialized scientific roles to recruit for that require some creative talent attraction efforts to find the right people for that. And then along with that, we get into these commercial roles where you have to have people that are good at selling and at the commercial function, but they've got the technical expertise as well. And that can be a tough skill set to find, people that have the right balance of that. That aside, when I think about what probably keeps me up the most at night, it's the manufacturing workforce. And if you look at the outlook in the U.S. for manufacturing talent, it's a pretty bleak outlook as far as what the available talent pool is for manufacturing operators, technicians, mechanics. The availability of people in that workforce is shrinking by the day. And when I go out and I do talks at high schools and career fairs and things like that, the manufacturing is not even on their radar as what a career option could be for them. They're looking, a lot in healthcare fields. IT is always, very popular across the board. And then, and now I've talked to many that wanted to be the next influencer in one way or another. But again, manufacturing is just not on a lot of people's radars these days. So we have a role then to educate our communities and people coming out of high schools and people in college and people in community colleges that, you can really make an amazing career path for yourself in manufacturing. We have manufacturing directors, managers, supervisors that started off in technician roles, in operator roles, and worked their way up through the organization. The reality is now that a really good qualified manufacturing technician is going to make a very good living. and very, very competitive salaries. But I think it's just off people's radars. So we have to be out in the community in front of people and educating people about what a career in manufacturing actually is, and the rewards that it can bring. And the other, I'll go back to the comment I made about the high schools. It's actually been with like students' parents that we've had some struggles too, where we've had some conferences with them involved, and they said, I don't want my kid to work in manufacturing. It's kind of like an old thing that we used to work in back in the day. But that's totally not what it is. The technology has advanced significantly, and you can make a great career path for yourself in manufacturing. So I think it's really just about how we educate people on that to gauge more interest in that area.
And you're spot on in your comments on that, because I think it's the old mantra, the old messaging was, right, you go to college and you get a job. And I think it's, as we look at it now, Darren, is that there's a great need for electricians and welders and tradesmen and mechanics out there. And I've got a friend whose son spent a semester at college and said, this isn't for me. And now he's learning to become an electrician. He's probably going to make more money than his colleagues coming out of college starting out, just because of the importance
Absolutely.
of that. So I think it's to your point, it becomes around the messaging, right? It's like, hey, it's okay. I mean, these are skilled jobs with highly experienced people that pay very well to help our country and help manufacturing.
Yeah, absolutely. And with this push for bringing more and more manufacturing into the U.S., we've got to be ready for it. I think that talent pool is going to be the biggest challenge in being able to make things happen and to staff plants in the right way. And we've done a couple of expansions. I think about one that we did out at our facility in Blair, Nebraska, where we were adding about 80 people, and that took a multi-prong approach. We did 8-10 different things. We had signage up, we were on TV ads, we were on radio ads, we had signs at the bus stops. I mean, we took a multi-prong approach to it. You can't just post jobs and say the people will come, because they're not coming for roles like that. You have to get out there and find creative ways to get them in.
So what are you doing with multi-generations? That's like a hot topic right now. Some companies have got 5 generations, 4 generations in the workforce. So when you're bringing in younger people whose work ethic, may be viewed by some of the other generations as different, or their communication styles are different. There's some that like to spend a lot of time looking at their phones. And what are you and your colleagues doing to kind of break down the barriers and the walls that some of the multi-gens will have in stereotypes of each other?
Yeah, we've and actually we're looking to do quite a bit more of this during this year. We've done some training on inclusion in the past, in the general scope, and the generational differences do come into play with that. So part of it has been just educating each other around what those generational differences are, how we like to receive and portray information. I think that's been a really big help to just put it out front there and talk about it, because oftentimes people don't talk about it and they just try to figure out a way to make it work. And I don't think it's realistic that people are just going to figure it out. I think it is something that you have to talk about differences and really go in with an inclusive mindset. Even from we've got this amazing opportunity right now, given our merger, to create all new policies and practices from the HR lens across the board. And as we do that, we're always looking at it through that inclusion lens. And inclusion, spans in a lot of different areas, but part of that is the multi-generational piece, and understanding that we have people in all realms of that at very different phases of life. So how do we create policies that work across the board in different ways for everybody, and create the right level of flexibility for people, independent of what stage they are at in life.
What about leadership? What are you doing in terms of developing leaders? You get people, and you've talked about, it's a challenge to bring in people, but once you get the people there, what type of leadership are you guys providing, leadership training to develop your high performers?
So we're actually in the midst of developing a new global program around leadership that is very tied into our core values and our culture commitments. We've taken a couple different approaches to that. I think the programs that we had in the past were really good from if you're thinking about being the visionary leader, setting the path, planning for the future, what does that look like? That being said, I think something you always have to be careful of, and I think we're doing a good job of addressing this moving forward, is that there's a practical component to leadership as well, in that you can create the most amazing vision in the world, but at the same time, if the what hits the fan and you're throwing things up in the air, not really knowing how to handle situations like that, we're not training you in the right way. We need to get you prepared for things like that. So we've done a couple things around, just to supplement the more visionary type of training. We've done some action learning events with our leaders where we actually put people in situations and give them live projects and let them work together, and deliver a plan and results on that. I've always found that, and again, I think it's great that we're addressing that in our future programs. You really have to have that practical component in there to supplement the visionary side of things as well, so that those individuals are learning to be effective day in, day out managers that can also create the vision.
Yeah, that's important. It's, the knowledge transfer is so much higher when we actually practice those skills and behaviors, right? It's one thing, you sit in a class and you think, oh, this is great. And then you go back, and to your point, everything goes sideways, and then you go back to the old way. So having those conversations, those audits, those milestones, those check-ins to say, let's practice the skills and behaviors you've learned. That's critical, because then people can see the real life application when a situation arises.
Yeah, definitely. Throw some real world case studies out there. Work through them. These are real issues that you're going to deal with day in and day out. And again, that visionary and the further strategic approach is critical as well. But there has to be a good balance there of being effective at managing the day-to-day operations as well.
Hey, I want to ask you a question about data. Every organization's got data, Darren. What's the culture and use of data there at your organization? Are you using data to move the business forward? Kind of how would you characterize using scorecards and metrics?
I think it's probably something that you'd probably get a different answer from different segments of our business. So it's something I picked, especially bringing these two companies together. We are actually in the process right now of combining all of our systems. And, this is another thing that I had no idea or vision of how complicated that was going to be. Like right now, we're essentially working in multiple different systems. And when it even comes up to, pulling basic reporting and things like that, we don't quite have the functionality yet to do that as a combined organization. And it's really created a gap for us. That being said, over the next month or two, we will all be together and have some good automated reporting and data that we can have our hands on real time. I'll looking at it through the HR lens. I've seen us get pretty sharp at using data. I mean, of course, there's the basics around turnover and things like that to understand where you may have pockets of issues. But we're using employee surveys as well that is pushing out some really great engagement level data to where we're looking at that against turnover numbers and against performance and within different areas to really identify where we've got some issues. And that's been really helpful to pinpoint things that we then get into and start having some focus groups and follow-up conversations around what might be driving those issues. And it's been really interesting to look at the turnover, the business performance, and the engagement survey. When you look at the three of those together, it's really interesting to see how they all align in a lot of ways, so that you can focus in the critical areas. But at the same time, you're going to leaders saying, hey, you're really knocking it out of the park across the board in all of those areas. What is it that you're doing that's making that happen? So we use some pretty simple data like that for some pretty powerful performance.
Yeah, data tells the story, right? And it tells us, kind of guides us on what we need to do on that. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us, and I kind of start wrapping things up, Darren, but I do want to ask this question. So for someone that is thinking about wanting to go into HR, if Darren would look back 20 years ago, is there anything you would have done differently on your career path? What's some advice you would share with folks that are just starting out in HR or thinking about it?
Yeah, if there's anything I would have done differently, I actually don't think there is. I think I got lucky at the way that things just kind of fell into place for me. That being said, I'll say HR is a very rewarding career path, right? And you have to think about what it was that reason that brought me into it and got me excited about it in the first place. I think it's when you get excited about what HR brings to the organization that's what can really hook you in and get you excited. So you also have to go in knowing that you're not going to be in the strategic clouds every day in HR. There's day-to-day things that happen, and some of those things are super uncomfortable for everybody that's involved in it. And you have to get used to that and get acclimated with it. Not everything's going to be a nice, comfortable work day. But at the same time, when you're able to handle situations like that and push things forward, that's when you're really adding value. The only other thing I would say on that, Seth, is just to give some thought around: is there a specialization that you want to have? Do you want to specialize in compensation or benefits, or HR tech is a big area as well, or do you want to be like in the role that I'm in, kind of more of the generalist type of function? So if you're looking at getting into it, network, get out to the local SHRM chapters, talk to people that are in the industry in different roles. That'll give you a pretty good sense of what path you ultimately want to take within HR. But been a very rewarding career path for me. It's not for everybody, but I've certainly.
You said something I want to just ask another question about. You talked about local SHRM. So how do you stay up to date on the changing landscape of the HR function, of some of the legal stuff that's taking place, the compensation? How do you stay informed and up to date on the changes?
I would say, and I will be the first one to tell you that I need to improve the way that I do this myself, because what happens, it's very easy to get wrapped up into your day-to-day work and things that are going on within your own organization, that you have to make a concerted effort to step outside of that into your network. And I think now in the information age, things are readily available to you. So when you get linked up with the local SHRM chapters, that's a great way to get started. They all have their own websites, and then you've got the general SHRM website in itself that does a great job of keeping you on top of things. That being said, I think it's good to look at it from multiple sources too. Like I use workforce.com a lot as a source of information. And then I have my partners in legal that are connected with other law specific websites, and we share information like that interchangeably just to stay up to date on things. We've got people in 40 different states across the US. So when there's things happening out in California, for example, we've got to be on the front end of it. So you really have to look at a few different sources of information to stay on tap with that. And you have to make a concerted effort to get out of the office and go to that networking event to hear what's going on in the industry.
Great stuff. Hey, Darren, I want to thank you. I know you're very busy, and I appreciate you setting aside some time to join us today on the Pulse of High Performance podcast. Again, Darren Alfano, head of people and organization at NovoNessus in North Carolina. Connect with him on LinkedIn, Darren Alfano. And we would love to have you join us again, folks, on our next podcast that we have coming up every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern. Podcast is available. Darren, thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks again, Seth, for the